Klangduk Thitladnerifican. Hying Sakan Nungdank Hajwamgabe. Taklabdi and saying Faru Sak Themimi Kirksiu. Klimpupleximanik Sakas Frindithimikalux Neotamrang. Laizing Thiphol Kun Makaktina. Maikikan. Takuxtit Hitakshmikeruwamixiukring. The floating market at midnight was silent. The light from an oil lantern reflected off the surface of the water. The faint sound of oars came from afar. A thin mist floated over the canal. The cool, damp air touched her skin and raised goosebumps. Mintra walked slowly along the wooden bridge. The smell of rotten water mixed with the scent of fried bananas. She looked around. No one was there. The once lively stalls now stood empty. Only the sound of dripping water fell from a leaking roof into the canal. She stopped in front of an old shop. A wooden sign, handwritten, read, "Open." Even though it was long past midnight. Inside, a dim lantern light flickered through the cracks. The faint smell of incense drifted out with the wind. Mintra stepped inside. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet. An old woman sat behind the counter. Her face pale, her eyes unblinking. Her lips curved into a faint smile, as if waiting for someone. "Are you here alone?" the old woman asked softly. Mintra nodded without a word. Her heart pounded. She felt as if someone was watching from the shadows. The lantern light flickered, threatening to go out. But the shadow of the old woman on the wall did not move with her body. Mintra swallowed hard. Her hands trembled without her knowing. She heard water rippling beneath the floorboards. The sound grew closer and closer. As if something was moving under the shop. The old woman slowly stood up. The smile never left her face. She reached out her hand. "What you're looking for is right here." Mintra stepped back. Her foot touched something cold. She looked down. The water's surface reflected a face. But it was not hers. The sound of rowing echoed again. This time from behind the shop. The scent of incense grew stronger, almost suffocating. The lantern's light shook violently as if caught in a storm. The old woman whispered, "Do not turn around." But the voice was no longer hers alone. Many voices spoke at once. As if people surrounded her on all sides. The empty floating market was now filled with murmurs. Laughter, the splash of oars, and the sound of crying blended together. Mintra stood frozen. She slowly turned around, and saw something rise from the water, inch by inch. Mintra's breath caught in her throat. The water rippled as something pale emerged, gleaming faintly under the swaying lantern light. At first, she thought it was a log, drifting upward from the dark depths beneath the floor. But as it rose higher, she saw fingers, thin, long, and trembling slightly, as if feeling their way through the air. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Each thump echoed against the wooden walls of the shop. The old woman's smile widened, too wide for any human face. Mintra stepped back again, and the old boards moaned beneath her weight. She wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. The pale hand gripped the edge of the wooden floor. Droplets of black water slid down from its wrist and splattered across her feet. She felt the chill sink into her skin, spreading up her legs like ice. Then another hand appeared, and then a head, slowly rising, as if the night itself were pushing it upward. Long, tangled hair clung to the wet face. When the figure lifted its head, Mintra saw empty eye sockets, dark and deep like the bottom of the river. A voice, not quite human, not quite whisper, filled the air. It sounded like water running backward, like breath pulled through mud. "You came back," it murmured. Mintra shook her head violently. "I do not know you," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. But the figure tilted its head, water dripping from its chin. The old woman spoke again, her tone calm, almost tender. "She knows you. Everyone here knows you. You were one of us." The words made no sense. Mintra's mind raced. She had never been here before. She was a tourist, visiting the floating market to take photographs, to write about local legends for her travel blog. She had come after midnight, curious about the stories of the silent hour, when the market sleeps but the river wakes. Now, those stories no longer felt like folklore. The pale figure pulled itself fully onto the wooden planks. Its movements were slow but steady, deliberate. As it crawled forward, the boards beneath it grew darker, soaked through with water that smelled of decay and lotus roots. Its hair dragged behind, leaving a wet trail that glimmered faintly under the lantern's unsteady light. Mintra stumbled backward, bumping into the counter. The bottles of old herbs and dried fish rattled. The old woman did not move, her eyes followed Mintra as if studying her reaction. "What do you want from me?" Mintra cried out, her voice cracking. The air felt thick, every breath she took filled her lungs with dampness and smoke. The old woman's expression softened. "Not what we want," she said slowly. "What you promised." "I promised nothing," Mintra said, shaking her head again. But as she did, her vision blurred for a second, and she saw something else. The shop looked different. The lantern was brighter. There were people, smiling, talking, buying fruits and sweets. And there she was, herself, standing behind the counter, laughing, handing a basket of lotus to a young boy. Then the image vanished. The smell of incense returned, stronger, burning her nose. The crowd was gone. Only the old woman remained, her smile fading into a look of pity. "You forgot," she whispered. "Some debts follow even when lives change." The figure crawled closer now, its hands gripping the floor beside Mintra's feet. Its breath, if it could be called that, was cold, damp, and smelled like rotting lilies. It raised its head, and Mintra saw, through the dripping hair, that the mouth was stitched shut with threads of black fiber. But a faint sound still came from within, a low hum, like a song remembered through water. Mintra stumbled to the door, but when she tried to open it, the latch would not move. She pulled harder. It felt as if someone on the other side was holding it shut. The voices outside grew louder now. Footsteps sloshing through shallow water. Whispers overlapping, laughter, sighs, and faint prayers. The smell of wet wood and fish surrounded her completely. She turned back. The shop was now flooded ankle-deep. The figure in front of her had stopped moving. The old woman was gone. Only her lantern floated on the surface, spinning slowly in circles. Mintra felt her throat tighten as she tried to breathe. Something brushed against her leg, soft, slippery, and cold. She jumped, but there was nowhere left to run. The walls of the shop seemed to shift, the gaps between the planks widening, letting more water seep in. The entire building groaned, like it was sinking. She screamed for help, but her voice was swallowed by the mist. No one answered. The voices that surrounded her began to chant, slow, rhythmic, echoing through the market. She could not understand the words, but they made her chest tighten and her head pound. The figure lifted its head again. Its empty eyes now seemed to glow faintly from within, a sickly blue light. It raised one trembling hand and pointed toward the water. Mintra followed the gesture, and saw her reflection. Only, it was not her face staring back. It was the same face as the figure's, pale, hollow-eyed, mouth sewn shut. She screamed again and fell backward into the rising water. Her hands splashed, trying to grab something solid, but everything felt soft, melting, dissolving like soaked paper. The lantern went out, plunging everything into darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Only the steady rhythm of dripping water remained. Then, a sound, the creak of a paddle. Slow, deliberate, moving closer. She could see faint light through the cracks in the wall, another lantern, floating outside the shop. A small boat drifted past. Inside it sat the old woman, her face calm and empty. Beside her, in the shadows, another figure sat, dripping wet, long hair covering its face. The old woman turned her head slightly toward the shop. "Midnight has ended," she murmured softly. "The river has taken what it remembers." The boat drifted away, vanishing into the fog. Inside the shop, the water slowly receded. The wooden floor creaked one last time before falling silent. The stalls outside were still empty. Only ripples remained where Mintra had stood. By dawn, the floating market looked as peaceful as ever. Vendors set up their boats, tourists took pictures, children laughed by the bridges. No one noticed the faint mark of wet footprints leading into the old shop. And no one saw the new woman sitting quietly behind the counter. Her hair still dripping, her eyes dark and deep as the canal beneath. She smiled faintly at the first customer of the morning. Her voice calm, soft, and welcoming. "Welcome," she said. "We are open." The sun rose gently over the floating market. Golden light touched the calm water, turning it into a mirror of dawn. Boats began to move again, paddles dipping softly, laughter echoing, vendors calling out for customers. Everything looked ordinary, peaceful, alive. The old shop at the end of the bridge reopened with quiet simplicity. A new woman sat behind the counter, her hair tied neatly, her smile calm. No one seemed to recognize her, but everyone felt a strange sense of comfort when she spoke. Her eyes were deep and kind, though sometimes a flicker of sadness crossed them when she looked toward the canal. Travelers came and went. Some said they felt an unusual coolness inside the shop, as if a gentle breeze came from beneath the floorboards. Others swore they heard soft humming, an old tune that faded as soon as they turned their heads. The lantern above the counter always stayed lit, even during the day, its flame steady and unwavering. As night fell again, the market grew silent. One by one, the boats disappeared into the mist. The woman locked the shop door, turned the lantern down, and looked out over the still water. The reflection of the moon shimmered faintly, rippling as though something moved just beneath. She whispered softly, not in fear, not in sorrow, but with understanding. "The river remembers," she said. "And so do I." Then she smiled, her face calm and gentle, the same faint smile the old woman once had. A sound echoed far off, the slow dip of an oar, the soft creak of a boat moving through the mist. The air filled once more with the scent of lotus and incense. And as the moonlight washed over the quiet market, the floating lantern in the canal flickered one last time, before the night grew still again. As if nothing had ever happened.